when we're in an exam situation, we don't just leave the question unanswered.
Yeah, that's true.
We answer it, right? From the best of our capabilities. You will see a whole garland coming through in a bit. How would you answer a question like that? What would be your tools and what method would you take?
Yeah, I think like if you believe there's a creator, you just have to came across any sort of like proof that it exists. Like maybe it's any sort of like, I don't know, like proof to yourself. Like I think it's like in that sense it's very personal. I think someone will take something very small as a proof, as a very good proof, and there's people that need like something really material, and some people use maybe something more small, or maybe a small act in his life is proof enough that something exists or that it doesn't.
So what about yourself? Are you open to proofs and evidence to formulate your ideology or belief?
Yeah, if I came because inside I don't have any evidence that it doesn't exist, as I told you. So if at any point in my life I came across any sort of something that I take as evidence that something exists or something doesn't, maybe I will take that point of view. Yeah, I'm not like.
So what kind of evidence are you open to?
Maybe something that happens in my life, something that I see, something that I think something. I don't think it's something very concrete, like something very. It's more open. I believe.
But what types of evidence are you open to? Because evidence
what do you mean exactly?
Evidence comes in various types. To give you an example of, say, I don't believe there are triangular circles in our world.
Like what? Sorry?
A triangular circle or a squared circle.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. I don't have to go to any lab to demonstrate that and prove it. Without doing any experiments, without replicating any experiments, I can be certain that they don't exist in our universe.
Yeah. How is that? Like, I know it's not true, but
yeah. So, do I need to experiment that to know that it's not possible?
Right? You cannot, right?
Yeah. So there are things that we can be certain of, even without empirical observations and experimentations and replicability.
Okay, yeah.
So these are rational proofs. So there are things that we need to be open to understand. So when we talk about God or the Creator, is God something or someone that can be answered by empiricism? Is that the right tool to answer this question? Sometimes we may need to have the right tool to get the right answer.
Yeah, true. I understand.
Because if God is beyond space and time,
that's true.
and you're using tools which are constrained within space and time, that would not be really the right tool to use to answer that question.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's why we would say God, the question of God's existence is beyond this particular framework or methodology of knowledge. So science is not in a position to answer the question because of the limitations of its methodology. Science deals with the world, the physical world. We don't deal with spirituality and metaphysics. Okay, so you can't answer a question which is beyond this world, right? We say, the believers, like I'm a Muslim, I believe in God. We say God is the one who created this world, so he's not bound or limited or constrained within this world. So you can't use the scientific method to answer that question whether God exists or not. You have to use something else.
And what would you use?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You have to use something else, like rational evidence. For example, rational evidence.
Just in your case, for example, or right?
Rational evidence can be one of the evidence in which we can. So that's why I asked you, what do you consider? Is this world has always been there or not? Because that can help us to understand this question better. Because either the world was always there or it wasn't always there. It's a binary question, and you can explore each alternative and see which one gives us an answer which makes sense, rational sense, coherent sense, so we can adopt as an ideology. So if the world wasn't always there, then we have to answer this question. When something like this world wasn't always there, how did it come to be? Because when it wasn't there, it was nothing to begin with. How did something arise from nothingness? It cannot. Because nothingness is absence of anything. Absence of energy, absence of time, absence of space, absence of anything that you can imagine. That's nothingness. So if our world in the past, in inverted quotes, was nothingness to begin with at one point, then there will always be nothingness. So that option is not an option which is meaningful and coherent. We cannot accept that. It doesn't make sense. So the world has to be always there, or something has to be always there. So this world demonstrates to us that it's actually quite contingent, limited and dependent on everything and everything that we see. Everything that you see, you are dependent on water and air and food. Anything else that you see, likewise, it's dependent, contingent on, right? The set of dependent things, the whole set, is going to be dependent. We cannot have a dependent thing existing by itself when it needs to rely on something that is not dependent, independent. So our world, looking at our world, needs to be dependent on or contingent on something that is independent, something that is absolute, something that is not limited.
In your case,
and in our case, that is what we say is the originator of our universe. Now, this originator, you can ask this question, what is the nature of this originator? Is that contingent, dependent, or is it not? Same questions again. It has to eventually be an originator or a creator that is not dependent. Eventually you have to come to a point. So there will be a point where you will have to come to a point of something that exists,
that is not dependent on something.
That is not dependent on anything, and that exists always, without being non-existent at some point of time, but it was always there. That is what we're referring to as the creator. And if you think about it, what's your name?
Sergio.
Sergio. I'm Mansur. Sergio, nice to meet you. Sergio, that thing that exists always without being dependent has to exist with certain qualities and attributes, because it didn't acquire them from anyone. It always had it, because it was always there. One of those attributes you can deduce right from here. It must be possessor of energy. Because without energy you can't do anything. It has to be possessor of energy, or power, or might. There's another thing. It must be existent.
Like, in what sense? Like,
it is real.
Okay,
it exists.
Okay.
Yeah. There are qualities of things, maybe, something I say, for example, zero. Does it really exist? It's a concept. But it has no real existence. We use this to conceptualize our mathematics and so on and so forth. But when we talk about God, it's not an abstract concept. It's a real existence.
Where can you find the videos? You put it
So the video that I have done, it will be in 2 channels. Write it down. Sam Dawah. And you spoke to my friend later, DawahWise. So I'll show you which one on the internet. If you excuse me for a second, I just want to show you. So one of them is. So
I wanted only
this one here, Sam Dawah.
Okay,
and then the other one also, it will be uploaded in this channel called DawahWise. This one here, DawahWise.
What means Dawah?
Dawah means to invite people to the truth. Wise, of course, is being wise. So you do that wisely.
Okay, thank you.
So Julia and Emanuela, it was a pleasure speaking to you. So hopefully if you come again, we can continue our conversation. Take care, bye-bye. Bye. So Sergio? Sergio. So we can come to the conclusion about certain properties or attributes of this being. Existence, possessor of power. I would also add self-awareness. Consciousness or self-awareness. Because if something is not self-aware and not conscious, how is it going to do anything with this power? Nothing will happen. On top of that, I would also add, it will be a possessor of something that has a will, a choice. So, willed this universe to come into existence in this way. rather than in other way. Because our universe could have been a different way. Like we could have been human beings with wings, for example. We could have, right?
Yeah,
So the way we are created in this way is because of a choice, because of a will of this being. So if you have an existent reality who is self-aware, powerful, independent, I would also say must be self-sufficient. Self-sufficient, independent, has to be one. Cannot be met. There cannot be more than one of those things. It doesn't.
Where is that? Like,
How do we arrive at that? Isn't it? How do we arrive that there can only be one of those things? If you think about it, if you had more than one of these things, what do we expect? For the sake of argument, let's take two of those creators who are self-aware, absolute, they are self-sufficient, they have power without any bounds, without any limitations. If that was the case, imagine now one of them wants to create something. He wants to create a world replacing this world. Should be able to do that, right?
Yeah,
That's all powerful.
yeah.
But if the other one says he wants to keep that world as it is, what's going to happen? There's a conflict of will.
Yeah, that's true.
Conflict of will. You can't have both. Either another world gets created, in that way the God, the creator which wanted it to happen like this is powerful, but the other one is not all powerful, failed to maintain it. And if the other one maintains this world and the first one is not able to create another world replacing this one, then the first one is not all powerful. You can only have one. It's like, I'll give you a simple scenario.
Yeah.
You do know how to drive?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Right. When you learned, you had an instructor sitting on the other side, right? Some of the cars have two different sort of steering wheels and clutch, gas, brakes and stuff.
Yeah.
If you have a car with independent controls, left and right, two drivers who are independent of each other, one of them wants to take the car to the south and the other one wants to take the car to the north.
Yeah.
Where's the car going to go?
It gets still, I guess.
Do you see the problem?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
cannot have two absolute sovereign wills happen at the same time because of the conflict of will. So our universe, the Quran actually says that لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. Had there been more than one gods, there will be corruption and chaos in this world. If there was two creators, one says, now I want rain, other one says, no, I want sunshine, there will be chaos and corruption. But look at our world, organized, control of one. There seems to be one originator control in this world. That's the reality. Otherwise, the earth will be split from its orbit and go somewhere else. We don't see that. We see in a very finely tuned universe. Yeah. So polytheism, or the belief in more than one creator, is actually not a rational concept. Critically thinking people know that, but they just have to accept it. Sometimes people are bound by the traditions and they just believe in it by blind faith. But we as critical thinkers, we have to really, say no, the truth has to be understood in that sense. We can't just use our gut feelings of our traditions. The Quran reprimands those who say, oh, I'm going to believe what my forefathers believe, what my parents believe, and what my ancestors believe. And the Quran says, even if they were wrong, are you going to carry on believing them? Because they could be wrong. So we should not just keep on for the sake of believing our parents and our forefathers what they believe. We have to believe in the truth. And the Quran offers us the criteria of knowing this with truth and sincerity. So what we've discussed, remind me of your name again, Sergio.
Yeah.
We talked about our universe must be dependent on someone or something that is independent, absolute. In philosophical terms, they call it being a se, having the property of aseity, self-sufficient. Okay? They also talk about this being is a necessary being. So our universe must be reliant on this necessary being because that being necessarily has to exist. And we know that. There has to be something that necessarily exists. In certain tradition, that is called wahdatul wujud, or the necessary existence. Same thing. The creator is a necessary existence who has created all of these things. Has to be one. Now I want to show you something, and I want to hear your reaction. Something that I'm going to 4 lines of a text. Okay, this text is from a religious scripture. Okay, of course this will be in English, but I want you to just give me your reflection on this.
Which one is it?
Just read the English.
Which one? The first one?
Yeah. Say,
Yeah.
O Muhammad, the Prophet,
Please be upon
He
him.
is Allah one. He is the self-sufficient.
Master whom all creatures
Or
need.
and He is basically everything. There's a word Samad means everything depends on Him. He doesn't depend on anything else. He doesn't begets,
Not.
nor is He begotten. He doesn't produce children, nor is He born Himself. There is no co-equal or comparable
Unto him.
with Him.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you see this concept? The concept of just what we talked about.
Yeah, yeah. It's
One, only, unique, absolute, independent, self-sufficient. The one who's not born, the one who doesn't give birth, because it will not be one anymore. There will be more than one. And there's nothing like unto this. Because anything with this property, there will be nothing like unto that. This is the Quran, chapter 112, called chapter of purity, describing who our Creator is. The Creator is telling the Prophet, the Messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tell them, say, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say He is Allah, the one,
the one.
the only, the unique. Does that resonate with you? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I mean, yeah, it makes sense, but from my point of view, like, I just find like very hard to believe, like for myself, like that there is something like that it's not dependent on something. Like it just was there.
I agree. It's
Like-
very difficult for us to accept it. That's why Islam means, in a way, submission and surrender of one's will. Because you might not realize that you are here. Some people say, I don't exist. And they say, no, I am the king. People have this kind of lots of cognitive dissonance and so on. They can't accept the reality for what it is. If I know that I am going to die, it's no point fighting it. No, I'm not going to die. I'm going to live forever. There's some people who want to. No, I'm going to live forever. No one can take me, make me die. I'm going to put myself in a vault, and nothing will take me. I'm going to have all this antibacterial prophylaxis, antiviral, antifungal, and microbial. I'm not going to die. But the reality is, Sergio, we are programmed to die in ourselves. Yeah. So we have to somehow submit to this fact. Once you realize you are a contingent being in this contingent universe, there is a necessary being which always exists. You know, why not me, that necessary being, you might ask. But the reality is you're not that. And we have to accept that reality. And this is the submission and surrender of the facts of reality, and saying, okay, now I understand, I am what I am. And I happen not to be the king. I happen not to be the prime minister, or not to be the creator of the universe. That is something that you make this internal submission. Once you do that, I know it's difficult because our ego is such that we don't want to. Many atheists, the reason they are atheists is because of this, exactly as you said. It's submitting their ego to someone greater than them. They can't accept someone's greater than them.
It's not something like in my case. It's not something like I like that's one thing. But it just like I just find like really hard to like think like there's a being like that is completely independent. Not the fact that I'm not that one.
Fine.
Just the fact that
Yeah.
that being exists.
I accept, and I agree. This is the case. It's just because we, having these qualities, we wish that everything was like us in our limitations, subconsciously. Because how can they be something that is independent? I mean, how can they be? But we have to acknowledge that there has to be that case eventually, because that is the reality of existence. The fact that I'm not a brain in a jar, that I'm alive and I'm going to die. We constantly submit to these realities. We don't like it, maybe, but we submit to these realities. And this is the submission that will free you from the enslavement of everything else that make you think and be in confusion and so on. Because once you are really free, it's only when you make that submission. You will be freely thinking. You'll not be bound by people's constraints and restrictions and so on. You will say no. Why should I be racist, for example? Your whole idea will disappear. Like the one who created me and you. We cannot have a distinction because he created you and he created me same. If I need blood, I can get blood from someone who's the same blood type. Whether you're a black person or a white person, doesn't matter, right? So whole idea of racism will disappear.